I'm your host, Elizabeth, and this is For the Talkers. Hello, talkers, and happy Thursday. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and this is the For the Talkers podcast. I'm so glad you decided to press play today. I have a super fun episode with Kirsten. We have a great conversation. She's so fun. She's such a storyteller and is really exciting with everything she had to say. She was also really open, which was super fun. She just really told some great stories. And we really got into curiosity and openness, having a sense of adventure. And I think this was a perfect episode for everyone. It had so much knowledge in it. And Kirsten gives us a little bit of her background. She's a third culture kid, and so you'll have to listen to kind of understand that a little more. But let me tell you more about Kirsten. Kirsten Rudberg is a Master's of Divinity graduate as well as a creative. An author, podcaster, screenwriter, as well as beekeeper, she is always looking for ways to include more human beings in the work she is engaging with. After being banned from the library in junior high, she continues to be an avid bibliophile, yet still finds time for Netflix. So join me with welcoming Kirsten. Okay, and I guess I should ask how to pronounce your name. Is it Kirsten?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. You probably get a lot of Kristen. I can start with my happy, funny, sads, and then I'll have you do yours. My happy is we got a new cat tower, and originally we just did like a few smaller things because Grace was like, cat towers are ugly, they're like carpet and whatever. We were at Costco and they have the cutest one. It's like fluffy and like beige, right? So it like fits in. And so Grace was like, okay, we could get that one. So our cat's been loving it. I love it. So it's been a win-win. And then my funny is I like to do my own nails. And my nieces came over, and I have a niece who's 5. She wanted her nails done, and normally we just do some colors. And she sat right down and she's like, I want ladybugs and leaves on my nails, and I want it to go ladybug, leaf, ladybug, leaf. I was like, okay, I love it.
Wow.
So I just could not stop laughing about. She knew exactly what she wanted and how she wanted it. So that was super cute. And then my sad is just sitting. So I'm a receptionist full time, and sitting at my desk, looking at the beautiful sunshine outside every day, it just makes me sad. I'm like, I want to be out there, and I just see it, like, it just looks so nice. And then by the time I get off, it's just hot, but like no UV, and
Right.
it's been a long day. So that's my sad. Yeah.
I think that's
Need more outside time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think outside time is amazing unless it's 115 degrees. Then forget about it.
Is that how hot it is where you're at?
No, I'm on the Oregon coast, thank goodness. And so I think the high today was like 69 or 70. And I'm not sure what the weather's supposed to be like over this next week, but around, I think, the same, similar, high around 70, 72 or so. So I've been watching the rest of the nation and kind of just with my jaw dropped, but also thanking every god or goddess in the universe that I'm here on the Oregon coast. So yeah. Okay, my happy, funny, sad. I am writing a comic book with a collaborator, and I'm the writer, author, I guess. And I just finished, I wrote all 5 issues at once. So the first 100 pages, which would comprise graphic novel, the first graphic novel. And once I got started, I busted it out, wrote 100 pages, and my collaborator read it and said, this is phenomenal. So I got 2 thumbs up. So that was my happy this past week and a half or whatever. Yes. Yay.
Yeah,
And
that
then,
is happy.
Yeah, it is. Thank goodness. I breathed a little sigh of relief. And then
Absolutely.
funny was I went walking on the beach here because I'm right on the coast. And I always, when I walk, I pick up garbage as kind of a thing so that the beach looks better than when I got there. And in these dunes, I don't know if some kids toy basket broke apart or their backpack was open. I started by finding a horse, a plastic horse. Then I walked a little further and there were like a couple super sparkly, fun, star shaped barrettes. And then a few more steps down were a bunch of shovels and things to make sandcastles. And then I found something else a few more paces and I thought, what happened here? Like, how did they even lose all this stuff? I was like, this is some sort of art thing, you know? So I put it all in my backpack and it's still sitting in my backpack. But that was pretty funny for me. And I
I
loved it.
love it.
It felt like a
Yeah.
treasure hunt. Oh yeah. And then
Right.
my sad was last October I moved from Santa Fe, New Mexico up to Chicago to take care of my mom. And 2 weeks after I got there, my stepfather died, which was totally unplanned. And then a few weeks after that, my mom got long COVID and then she got sick again. And then she broke a bone in her back. And I left her. I stayed with her until she was doing better in March. But my sister just messaged me and said my mom fell again and broke another bone in her back, a different one. So
Oh,
sad this week is that my mother, both of my parents are getting elderly. They're not together anymore, but my mother's in incredible amounts of pain and she's probably not going to get better. So that was my sad. I know that's really heavy, but that was my sad
yeah.
this week.
Yeah, sometimes that's what the weeks are, you know?
Yeah.
Some are lighter, some are heavier, while sending lots of thoughts your way and your mom's way,
Thank
but
you.
that is
Thank
sad.
you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, I am super excited to get to hear a little bit more about your story. I know a little, but we're going to give the listeners the full scoop here. So, first, I want to start with growing up in Guyana and Pakistan. How did your early experiences shape your worldview and influence your creative work?
Yeah, that's such a great question because I always tell everybody that growing up overseas was the biggest gift my parents could ever give me. I mean, in Pakistan especially, I went to the American school. So I went to school with kids from Canada, Germany, Vietnam, you name it. I was in school with those kids. And we didn't care. I mean, we just wanted to play soccer together, have fun together, have recess together. Nobody cared about what religion you were, what color your skin was, nothing, none of this stuff, what you wore. We just wanted to go and have fun. And that kind of experience, growing up all over the world and seeing all sorts of art and architecture, ways of worship, the food, all the different food, because I love food. It changed me. It changed me forever. And it allowed me to know that the world is a really big place with lots of diversity, so much multiculturalism, so much amazing food, in case I neglected to mention that before. Just fabulous people, kind people, good people. And, I brought that back with me when we moved to the States. And it was very harsh coming to Illinois after living all over the world. And there's nothing wrong with Illinois, but suddenly I was thrust into a school where everyone was white, everyone was the same. What you wore was so important. What you brought in your lunchbox was so important. There was a hierarchy. My mom sent me to school the first day in my Pakistani clothing, which was not a good move on her part. But yeah, I struggled. I struggled so much that I had to do fourth grade again. I had to repeat fourth grade because I couldn't adjust. I could not adjust. But the upside was I started hiding in the library and they couldn't pry me out of that library. And I read everything under the sun. And I think my exposure to all the kids, all the cultures growing up all over the world, and then reading every book known to man. In seventh grade, I did a reading competition. I read 96 books. In eighth grade, I read 120 books. That's all a really good groundwork for being creative later in life. When you see so much of the world, you experience so much of it, and then you read and read and read till the cows come home. All of that allowed me to kind of just use my imagination in ways that I think I was really lucky. I was really lucky to have all those experiences. It changed me forever creatively.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm curious, what would you say is like your number one creative outlet?
Ooh.
Because I know you got a few things you do.
Well, the one I spend the most time on is my podcast because, as you well know, they take a lot of work. And that
Yeah.
comes out once a week, sometimes twice a week. And so that's the one that takes a lot of my time. But where my passion is, I was talking about that comic book with you earlier. Man, I love visually using visuals and the written word to create a story. I just love it. And that's really where my passion lies is, I have my animated series on YouTube. I got to tell the animator what I wanted to see. I wrote the scripts. Then we got in the studio and did the actors. I just love writing. That's where my passion is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I I feel like that is true a lot of the time. We have like our number one, what we're most passionate about, and then it's like, but here's what really is taking up the time.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so going off your childhood a little bit more, I'm curious if you have like a specific memory, experience, or whatever that had like a really significant impact on you.
Gosh, from overseas, I think, is what you're talking about.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because obviously, overseas as a whole had a
Yeah.
big influence, but I'm curious if there's like one specific time or memory that just like
Yeah.
changed you or the
Yeah.
way you think.
Because sometimes I look back at this memory and I think, my God, I could have died. And I don't know how I actually lived through this. So my parents took me to Kashmir. I was lucky. I was the oldest. They left my brother and sister at home, took me to Kashmir for a week, and we stayed on a houseboat. And Kashmir is like one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But not only that, has been at war, so nobody can really go visit most of the time since I've been there. So it was really just such an exceptional time to even be able to go to Kashmir. And we're on this houseboat, and I was 4.5, and bored. And we were in this houseboat, not a lot to do. We're on a lake. And so I started for fun. There was this ledge all around the houseboat, like at foot level for me, that was about 2 inches wide. And then at my chest area, there was this rim around the edge of the houseboat. And so for fun, when the adults weren't watching me, I was holding on to the edge and walking all around the exterior of the houseboat. So having fun, exterior of the houseboat, going around, and then suddenly I slipped. My feet slipped, and I fell off the side of the houseboat. But on the way down, my 4.5-year-old hands caught where my feet had been standing, this tiny ledge. I started screaming up a storm, and the gentleman who was like helping us with the houseboat came out. I don't even know how he came out and rescued me. I was half in and half out of the water, and there were crocodiles or alligators, crocodiles, I think. Needless to say, it's a miracle that I caught on. I didn't know how to swim at that point, so if I wouldn't have caught that, I could have died. But not only that, the crocodiles. So
Right.
I always think back at that memory,
Right.
or remember it and just wonder how I caught that ledge, how I saved myself. But then I'm grateful. I'm like, my God, thank God. Thank God I was like, I don't know, quick like a monkey and caught the ledge.
Right. Right. Didn't just freeze up in the
Right.
moment.
Yes.
That is that's pretty impressive. I'm impressed you even had that idea. Cause what a fun game.
Yeah.
But I'm glad
Yeah.
you were able to have some quick reflexes and there was someone nearby.
Yes.
That is
Goodness.
that is quite the memory. Shifting, well, I guess still on the same kind of wavelength about your childhood, how you're raised. So you have the term third culture kid in your bio. So for those who are unfamiliar with that, if you would kind of explain that and maybe kind of how it resonates with you.
Yeah. I didn't even know I was a third culture kid until someone I met was like, "Oh my God, you're a third." And I was like, "What is that?" They're like, "Look it up on Wikipedia." And of course, there's a wiki entry. And I mean, it's basically a child that grows up in a culture that is not their own. So I was born in the States, but I grew up in Guyana and I grew up in Pakistan. Open and you're curious about the world and you're just different in some way. And I thought, okay, I mean, I guess I'm just me, but then I read that wiki article or entry and I thought, oh my God, that's me. I mean, there it is, right there. And third culture kids tend to be more curious about the world. They tend to be more open, like open as in open to new ideas, to new cultures. They tend to other people less frequently, more accepting, more expansive. But the big thing for me is just curiosity. I'm endlessly curious, and I always tell people if I could and I was wealthy beyond measure, I would go to school the rest of my life and never have a job, but just learn forever.
Yeah, I love it. With you saying that, I'm curious what you think. Do you think any of those kind of aspects and traits that you're talking about, because obviously some of them are pretty objectively positive, right? We want people to be curious and open and welcoming to other people. Do you think that can be taught in a similar way? Or because I can see both ways of like, oh, maybe some of those traits can be taught and, shown, but really being immersed in the full culture of it that, I mean, to some point also can't be taught. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, I agree with you that immersion and going to another country is essential, and especially when you're a kid, because you don't have any really preconceptions about the world or the people in it. I remember when we came back and we were in the States, people would make comments about Muslim people or Hindu people, and I just thought, do you even know any? I mean, I lived there and they're not like what you're saying. And I've over and over, no matter what the group is overseas, I walk around and meet people in the States who are like, they're this, or those people are this. And I'm like, have you spent time with them? Do you know them? Because most of them would welcome you into their houses and feed you and welcome the stranger and be kind and be open. And I'm all about go over there, because before I walked the Camino, people had told me how terrible people were in France, like how ugly and gross they were. And then I walked the Camino and I walked mostly through France, from southern France to northern France. And I've never been treated with more love in my entire life, ever, by the French people in these small villages. And I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly did not show up judgmental and expecting people to treat me badly. I was just in it for the adventure. And by the way, what everyone had said about French people was totally false. They're wonderful. They were wonderful to me.
Right.
So I think you really do have to go and spend some solid time to experience the hospitality, the friendliness, just the conviviality of another country and the people in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That's so perfect. And what a fun experience, and that you were able to like take something that you heard so much about and you're like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So you've brought up a few different things that it's like, obviously you're a very adventurous person. I'm curious what role adventure does play in your life and how you incorporate it in your daily routines. You're obviously a very adventurous and creative person. So I'm curious what, that daily routine kind of is.
Yeah, adventure. I love that word so much. Adventure. I mean, I tell people all the time that is the reason to wake up in the morning because you don't know if something's going to happen in your day that's going to change everything. You might meet someone that changes everything. You might have an experience with a stranger that changes everything. And just walking out your front door for me is an adventure because you never know what the day is going to bring. And I think, I mean, look, when I'm going to work, sometimes I'm like, I don't care about the adventure right now. I'm exhausted. I don't want to go to work. This sucks. So it's not like my entire life is a rainbows and puppy dogs. There is some grumbling and whining involved. But I do think that if you approach life with potential, like there's potential inherent in walking out your front door, and you have faith that everything is working in your best interests, even though it might be painful, even though it might involve suffering, even though it might suck to the nth degree. If you just have faith that it's all going to work out for you, that makes it even more beautiful and more exciting to like go out and greet the world and just wonder what each day is going to bring you. And look, I did not used to feel this way. I mean, this has been a recent development in the last, I would say, 8, 9, 10 years. Really, I did not feel this way most of my life, but I've had a change or a shift, I guess you could say, where I've learned to reposition my attitude towards life so that it's one of faith and trust, I guess you could say. Faith and trust in the adventure.
I love it. That's perfect. I love being able to kind of go through things and I'm like, okay, I think I'm like thinking differently about that. I think my opinions have changed. And like you're saying, my perspective. I love that. And I liked what you said. I'm worried I'm gonna butcher it, but you said every day everything may change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's amazing. What a good thought.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have like a number one, like that's the most like amazing thing I've done.
Like done in a day or
Like gone out and experienced.
oh my God. Okay, so when I was walking the Camino, I got to this place to spend the night one night. And there was a pilgrim who was walking with me from Australia. And the people didn't have any food, but they had these friends, They're like, oh, go visit our friends in the restaurant down the street. They have a great restaurant. You'll be able to have something to eat. And so we're like, okay. And so the Australian and I go to this restaurant. It's closed. It's locked. All of a sudden, these two guys, one of them was like 60, the other one was like 20 years old. They pull up in this tiny little van and they're like, it's closed. And we're like, yeah, it's closed. And they're like, are you hungry? And we're like, yes. And they're like, get in the van. We're going to go to the next town and we're going to have the most amazing dinner ever. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to get in the van because I'm with someone and I feel safe and it's going to be okay. So we're in the van. The man is driving like 100 miles an hour and it is scaring the living crap out of me. And I'm like, we're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. But we went to the town of, I think it's called Pellegrino. Anyway, it's where Pellegrino comes from. And he's like, our friends have this amazing restaurant. You're going to love it. So we go in, we end up eating this huge dinner with 10 other people in his family. And it's a buffet. So you go up and there's just like French food for miles. You just load your plates up. We're loading our plates up and eating. The family's everyone's laughing. There's kids there. The entire conversation centered around, my gosh, what's the zombie show on HBO? It was really, really big where everybody just chops each other up. It starts with the W. I can't think of it right now.
Is it The Walking Dead?
Yes, Walking Dead. That's all they were talking about was Walking Dead in this small village in France. And it was so surreal to be there with this amazing food. And then, I finished my meal and the waitress, is so nice. The owner of the restaurant comes over. She's like, get some dessert. And I'm like, I'm going to explode. She's like, no, 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 go get dessert. And I look and there's like 10 desserts. Anyway, the Australian and I were about to just be sick all over each other. And then finally, the family wraps it up. They pile us back in our van and he dumps us off in front of that restaurant again. It was the craziest experience I've ever had. Just, I wouldn't have done it if I was by myself, as a woman by myself, I wouldn't have done it. But I felt safer to do it with this Australian man who I also kind of didn't know. But somehow it led to this huge adventure that was totally hilarious and where I became incredibly bloated from all the food that I ate. So, yeah.
Okay, hearing that story and like how he just picked you up, brought you back, I'm like, does this happen often? Like, is this just like another day? Like, they just pick people up, come bring them over? Is that just like a part of their routine?
I don't know. That is a great question. I think it just is indicative of just the friendliness and the welcome that I felt in France, just how people were so kind to me and fun.
Yeah.
I met so many fun people there.
That's amazing. Awesome. Well, I've been wanting, or maybe wanting's not the right word, but liking to ask people about like books or movies and how they influence them and, whatever niche they're in. And so I'm curious if you have a book or a movie or anything of the like, really, a podcast, magazine, like any kind of, media that like really influences your creative process or thoughts or anything along that line.
Okay, so even though I have a master's of divinity and I went to seminary, I have been a science fanatic my whole life. So I read science magazines since I was a kid. So there is a special place in my heart for science fiction. Like, I'm a massive science fiction fan. But the most beautiful book that I've ever read in my entire life is Winter's Tale by Mark Helprin. And it's so powerful for me. I've read it 4 or 5 times. I have a first edition, which I was lucky enough to find at Powell's in Portland. It is, you'd call it fantasy. So I also like fantasy. It is one of the most gorgeous books, and several reviewers in the last century, which I can't even believe I'm saying that, said that it was one of the most important and incredible books of the latter half of that century, of the 20th century. They made a terrible movie that I just can't apologize enough for, even though I had nothing to do with it. But the book is beyond gorgeous and it's layered. And it really, when I read that, I was so gobsmacked at the end of it. That was when I realized for the first time what word and image could do as far as putting beauty out into the world and creating something, yes, that wasn't real, that wasn't true, but that could be real in people's minds. That it's so powerful and potent that it can occupy a space in your imagination where you want to be there. You want that world to be real. And the author uses a little bit of historical, it takes place in Manhattan, the 5 Points neighborhood. It's like so hard to explain, but it's absolutely gorgeous and it gobsmacked me. And that's when I kind of understood what humans are capable of as far as creating a work of art that's also incredibly beautiful and that can change lives.
That's really beautiful. I love that. What was the name again?
Winter's Tale by Mark Helprin.
Okay. Definitely going to link that and also go get it. That sounds beautiful and very inspiring. I like the themes of like creativity that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I really like that. Okay. Well, I want to hear a story because obviously writing is where your passion's at. You can tell that and feel that just from even hearing you talk about it. But we know the podcast is kind of the more full-time, hands-on. So I'm curious if you have like a moment or specific person that like really inspired you from your podcast?
Oh my gosh, that is such a huge question because I'm on like episode 186 this week, and I have interviewed so many people who are so powerful and really have incredible stories to tell. But the one that really sticks with me and that I recommend to a lot of people is it's in my early days, bless them, where my friend from my cohort in seminary, Reverend Christine, she's a Unitarian Universalist minister now. She shared a story. She was doing her internship as a chaplain at a hospital in Florida. And she talked about the Pulse Massacre had just happened just a few months before. And the city was still reeling. She was working in Florida, just in the next city over. And she is also a lesbian. She's gay. And so she was the chaplain that night. And this man came in and he was suffering from shortness of breath. He felt like he was having a heart attack. He was just really struggling. And the nurses came over to her and said, look, we've run every test that we can run on this man. Every test. Nothing's wrong with him. We think he needs you. So he needs someone to talk to. And so she went in and she ends up talking to him for like a couple hours. And he finally confides to her that he is really struggling. He has all these expectations on him, with his family, his wife, his kids, his job. So all of these things are piling up. And so they start talking about all these different things. And then finally, she said that he started crying. He just started weeping in the room. And she said, why are you crying? And he said, I'm just so overwhelmed by life. And he said, and then I just discovered that my brother-in-law is gay. And he said, I have no idea how to deal with this, how to engage with this. Like, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in what this existing. And he was just very anti. He was a homophobe. And so they talked about it a little more. And he finally said, I can work through this. They made a list and they were going to burn everything that he was worried about and concerned about. And then he started crying again. And she said, what's going on? And he said, my problem is that I don't even know how to talk to him because I've never met anyone who was gay. And she said, yes, you have. And he said, who? And she said, Robert, I'm gay. And she said he just started sobbing. And he was so beside himself and broken open in that moment. It's like his heart exploded open. And it changed his entire perspective on everything. And he left somewhat healed. And all it took was that, we were talking earlier about judging people from other countries or judging people from whatever, who cares? Like whatever that otherness looks like, judging them. But all you have to do most times is actually spend time with those people. Spend time with someone who identifies as LGBTQIA. Spend time with someone who practices Islam. Spend time with someone who's Jewish. I mean, that's all you have to do. And then you discover the common humanity. And I think, if we live in an insular world or an insular society where we're always facing inward and we're like living in fear, we're living in not wanting to believe in the world or trust in the world, then yes, we're going to self-ratify those beliefs that the other is evil or that they're bad. But if you trust in life and you trust that life is an adventure and that most people are good people and they want to know you, by the way, and celebrate who you are, then I think suddenly you'll meet people who you might have otherwise not met or trusted or believed in, and you'll understand that they're exactly like you and that they just want to be liked too. They want to belong. They want to be a part of the family, whatever family that looks like.
Wow, yeah. I love that. First of all, what a beautiful story. And I couldn't agree more, right? We have to surround ourselves and how easy we can say this, that, and believe it's true because there's nothing to really base it off in the first place. So I really love that. That is so perfect. I definitely want to, well, first of all, I want to listen to that episode. And then I also will link it below. So if anyone wants to hear more, they can listen to that. So tell the listeners, if you don't mind, where they can find your podcast, how they can, if they want to read your comic book when it comes out, how they can do that.
Well, yeah. Okay. So my podcast is Bite-Sized Blessings, and it's BYTE because every episode is a unit of information, but it's also kind of a celebration of my scientific love of the world. So Bite-Sized Blessings, and you can find it everywhere because I'm shameless. So Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, whole oeuvre. I'm rewriting the entire thing, but making it more forcefully engage with, societal ills like environmental degradation, human trafficking, sweatshops, et cetera, et cetera. And those books are sold at George R. R. Martin's bookshop in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So that's a really big coup for me. And then, yes, anything else that I'm involved in will be on that website. So go there.
Perfect. I love it. That's awesome. I'll send everyone that way. That's all of my questions. But if there's anything else that you are just wanting to share, say, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I mean, first of all, this has been really fun, and you absolutely lived up to the hype. And I have to tell all the listeners that Elizabeth is endlessly patient because I sent her little cuckoo emails earlier this week, and she totally worked with me. But, I think there's a choice in this life, right? There's a choice of how to orient yourself to the world. And this world is not easy. It is challenging. It is hard. It is full of terrible stories, and sometimes people who act terribly. And we're bombarded with it day after day after day. And so how does anyone's heart stay hopeful or happy or even trusting in this world? And I do think that this world is alive. I think everything is conscious and sentient and waiting to have a conversation with us. So if you slowly, or maybe all at once, kind of begin to understand that the world wants to communicate with you or be in a relationship, however that looks like, and that most people are good and they're beautiful and all they want to do is belong or be in community, then I think that will help in itself to make the world more beautiful for you. I think live with your imagination, live with the belief in other people, and live with the idea that this world is a beautiful place. And that's a great way to be in this life.
I love that. That's absolutely perfect. I feel so silly. Like, obviously I'm recording this and I'm just like, I gotta write that down. I have to write that down. That's so perfect. I love that. So I'll definitely be listening back to this, just going, yes, I do. Okay, well, thank you for your time. You have been so fun. You're a phenomenal storyteller, obviously, right? And I can totally feel your openness and just through the computer here. You matter. And what you have to say matters. I love it. That'll be perfect.
Thanks for listening. Remember to leave a rating and review, subscribe, and come back next Thursday for a new episode. And remember, you matter and what you have to say matters. So join me here with For the Talkers.